Adam here with Wholesale Septic Supply. Today we're going to go over wiring up a pretty simple panel. This is a simplex panel. It's one of our best sellers, an LPDB box. And we're going to show you how we mount them, how you drill into them, how you wire it, and get everything going. So we're going to go through the whole process today of how this goes and show you how simple it is. Then you know how to do this. Okay. So sometimes it's not always available, and we'll use a 4x6 post. So what we've done is we put it in concrete, obviously, and this is just for display purposes. But if you use one of these, you want to go a little bit further down than this. You want to go down actually probably that deep and then pack it in, or you can mount it to the house. So these boxes, all these boxes, whether it's this box or a different box, they all have these little mounts on them, okay? So they come with them. You can have these at an angle. You can have these at this angle. You can do different things with them to then mount them to the wall of the house or to a post, any which way you want to do it. So they come with this. It just screws in to the position you want, and there you go. So when you're mounting these, you're going to want to, on this one, see we have this, you're going to want to find the ideal level. You don't want it really low. What you want is, you want it at a level where, okay, I can work on it easy from this position, and you know, it's easily accessible. You can do everything on it. So about, you know, right below your chin, chest level, you know, anywhere in this range is good, okay? So that it's easily accessible. Also keeps the water off of it. We've seen ants get inside of these. There's all kinds of different variations of problems that can happen. So that's one of the processes you're going to do. Okay. So next process. Okay. So when we mount this thing up, we're going to just put it up here. We're going to torpedo level it, and there's some stuff that you can do, but we want it as level as possible. So I just moved. We're going to mark it, but the thing about having this is you can pilot hole it, and then we can kind of mark it where we're going to go. Okay, so we got that. I'm going to pilot this. All right, so we're going to drill into this, and we're using a star bit, which not everybody uses. Okay, so we got one in, and then we can torpedo and do the rest of it. There. You can tell that I like things exact, but this isn't also the end of the world. But you want it kind of, you know, you want to do it right. Okay, so that's set up in there, and it's not really on there square though. So let's exit this out. Okay, so now you're secure. So the next step is to actually take, some guys do this before and some guys do it after. So I've seen our guys do it both ways. We're going to use a bit like this. Now this bit's expensive. They're like 40, 50 bucks. You don't have to necessarily use a bit like that. So the going in, what you're going to want to look at is, okay, I got my power coming in here. All right, my ground bar is here. All right, I got my pump out going here and my alarm going here. So we're going to have two separate wires for this and a separate wire here. typically what we do is we run on a box like this, you'll run your alarm wire and your pump wire in the same conduit out to the tank. This will be a separate conduit because it's coming from the house. So you'll drill a hole. We're going to drill a hole as close as we can right here because we want to try to mount the conduit here and then screw it down, anchor it so it's nice and clean. You can leave it flapping around. We just, you know, there's some people don't like doing that. So we want to see where we're at. And on this, let's see where the we're going to go in right about here. So we're going to go in kind of towards the back. And these bits are fantastic, I'll just tell you that. So we're going to test, and I don't think that's not near enough. So you just go in, and the thing about this bit is you kind of start off small, and then it gets bigger. So it's kind of hard to mess it up, and we're almost there. If you've done this a lot, then there's no guessing. Sometimes we'll use 1 inch. These bits tend to last a long time for the guys. And there you go. So there's one. So what we're going to do, set this up, put this in there, and we're going to secure this in. Okay, so we got one set up. So you got your one set up in there, okay? You're going to take your next one. This is going to be going out. So you're going to be going out to the pump and the alarm, all that stuff. So another one. I'll drill that right over here. You drill that out pretty quick. Once you got everything set up, you got this in there. Now this is your house. You're going to have your conduit. Now this conduit's obviously not long enough to go all the way in the ground, but you're going to stick your conduit in there, then you can run your wires. All right. So it's going to come out, and then you'd 90, and then go out your way. You'd have your connection. Sometimes this conduit wouldn't be that long. Doesn't necessarily mean it's going in the ground. Sometimes it's going to be short, going back into the house, to a box, something of that nature. So you're going to just take these. We're going to glue these up. We don't care. It doesn't have to be blue primer or anything like that. This stuff actually melts the PVC. And stick that in there. Stick that one in there. And I personally like anchoring things, so there's less problems later if the glue comes out or something like that. You just don't have issues down the road. So there's that one. Then we can anchor that one. You don't have to anchor this. It's not a requirement, but it makes it look cleaner. and things happen, I mean, age and things like that. But this one down here. And it all depends on where you're mounting this. But I mean, even on a house, we would typically, our guys are gonna they're going to mount the PVC like this, and they're going to anchor it down. So once you have that, this is not code, okay? So we're not giving you like, oh, do this and do that. So you're going to have your conduit, and you're going to have to do your runs. So we're using Romex just because we have it right now, and this would run down to here to your power source, okay, to your main breaker. Supposed to use stranded cable going out because heat buildup, things like that. If you're using the right gauge wire, we've run into a lot of places 10, 15 years that Romex was used, and there's no electrical issue with it, as long as you're using big enough cable. We do see things where guys want to go cheap and they run thinner cable, and then people have problems later down the road, and it's because they didn't use the right size wire that they should have right off the bat, and that would have solved a lot of issues. So you also want to make sure all your power is off when you're working on these. So what we have is we have this going in, and we're going to have so you're going to go your ground. There's your grounding bar. So you're going to go in there, too much. Okay, so we don't want a bunch of wire. We're going to cut this off. Then we're going to put that in there. You just don't need a bunch of exposed wire in there. So that's the grounding bar we're going to use. You can use individual ones if you want, like, oh, the pump's going to go here. You're going to have a ground for this. There's no ground on the alarm floats. You know, so, oh, we're going to have a ground here and a ground there. You can use the individual ones. A lot of people just use the same one. They have a bunch of wires going in there. So we're going to have this, and we need a little screwdriver for this bus bar that we have on this panel. And you're going to look at this, and we're going to have to strip some wires back. But other than that, it's not going to be a difficult situation. Okay, so you have your power coming in. You have your white, your black, your ground. Okay, so your white goes in here. Your black's going to go in here. So you have all that glory figured out. So there's one. Take this little screwdriver. We're going to secure this into place. We're doing a lot of moving around. So make sure your power's off too. I mean, I don't want to have 15,000 disclaimers and then some, you know, oh, I didn't know I needed that off. If you don't know what you're doing with power, I'd recommend you just don't fool around with it. But this is a pretty simple box. So this one's in there now. That's good. So this one here. We got to make this work, you know. We turn this on and it doesn't work, we'll have problems. We'll be like, oh, he doesn't know what he's doing. But, and really, I haven't done this in a long time. So, but this project, you know, shouldn't take you that long. Hour and a half to set up something like this. Take your bus wire. You can shove that in there if you want to. And see what we got going on here. Okay, so abracadabra. Everything is on there. So now we got our power going in. Now we have to think about our power going out. So you have these two, right? Some guys will use a different color wire. A lot of people that what they're doing is they're running into multiple color wires when they go out to a panel and they're trying to figure out what's going where. Generally, your pump wire is going to have to be thicker because your pump's pulling 10 amps, okay? So at a minimum, it should be 14 gauge, all right? So that's one way to kind of tell if they're stranded wire and you got a blue and a red and a orange and a white and all these different colors in there. Generally, the thicker wire is going to be running your pump. On an alarm, all it's running is this. I mean, it's a 5 amp float, so it's real little. I mean, you could use 18 gauge and no harm's going to come from it. It's going to be fine. So that's one thing. Now on this, we're just going to use 14 gauge for both. But you can get both these wires down here, so you don't have to run multiple things. One wire is going to go to the alarm. One wire is going to go to the thing. And with stranded wire, it's also much easier to go in there. When they're running Conduit, I've seen guys that they're using Romex or anything like that. A lot of times guys want to use Romex because it protects the wire. The stranded wire, you can get a nick in it. We've been out to multiple jobs where there's a nick in the stranded wire, causes a short later. The Romex kind of protects it. If you're doing a long run with the electrical, you're going to run it, you have your sticks laid out, and then what they're doing is they're shoving it through one, then they're shoving it through another, and then they're gluing it after the fact. They're not putting them all together because, earlier I tried to come up through here and you'll hit a blockage, and then it's just, you get, there's a certain amount of frustration going on. So this is my pump wire. We've got our ground wire going to our ground bar. Some of these panels, for the sake of saving space and the bus bar not being wide, some of the panels will have a ground that's going here, and then they have a separate ground. They're using a ground bar on this, so you're pulling this, wire all the way across over here and doing this. It should be a protected wire, but we're using Romex on this, so that's why it's naked. On a stranded wire, this would be protected all the way to here. If the ground's going into here, it's not really a big deal. I mean, we've seen 10 times worse. And so you have your white wire, black wire, so we're going to go in, pump out, and shove our black wire in. You're just kind of doing one thing at a time. Where it gets interesting is, a lot of people get confused, is you're not running the pump wire all the way to this thing, or the float switch. So really this is connecting to the float switch and the pump. So because the float's generally so far out, you're not going to have you're not going to want to run it all the way. And the reason why, your 30-foot floats, your big floats, they're used for like really deep lift stations. On a system like this, you want to make your connection as close to the tank as possible. And the reason being is you don't have to pull a bunch of wire and then fish it back through. You can kind of do all the work right then and there, and it's much more user-friendly. If you start using a bunch of wire down the road, it might be easier like on setup. Though this is really simple, well, when it breaks, and eventually it will, 10 years down the road, now you're in a real predicament, especially if you're in 30, 50 feet of wire. It just becomes a real hassle. So you're going to want to not do that and not put yourself in that position, and you run power wire out to a junction box, an LB. We put LBs on top of the tanks, and that will save you a lot of headaches because it's much easier to repair, and if you seal everything correctly, you won't have any problems. So, which is also important. You just don't want issues later. So, okay, so this wire here, float, relatively easy. I don't think we need this much bead on here. I'll cut a little bit off that with a little cleaner. So these bus bars, they're a little different than the black bus bars. The thing that is nice about these that I like is that sometimes when a pump motor gets old, it starts overamping. We've had instances where this will melt, generally just melt like 2 of these. And then you don't have like one big black connected bus bar. We have to replace everything in the wiring. You can just replace this piece. You can just unscrew this, break this off, put a new piece on there, and you're good on repair. Now, does that happen often? No, it doesn't happen that often. But when it does, it's nice to have this. Another nice feature of these is that you can touch this. They're recessed way in there, and you don't have to worry about getting shocked. So these are all UL for NEMA 4X, weatherproof this, blah, 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 blah. You know, drilling into them. They just have to leave on the UL thing. It's kind of it's good that they are and they're designed for it. But on the UL and the NEMA thing, the thing is, they're UL and NEMA from the shop. But once they get out in the field, it doesn't mean that they're put into, you know, UL or NEMA standards, things of that nature. So that's the problem. Now, a lot of your cities, counties, states will they have to keep the standards, so you have to do certain things. You have to have certain enclosures, certain fittings on there for it to work. So, okay, so now we got that wiring done. Here's my alarm, and it would be nice to figure out which one's which. All right. Okay, folks. So you have here's your float switch and your pump wire. Okay. Now you have your power coming in right here. You're not running your float all the way back there or anything like that. You're always going to have a junction or something of that nature. Okay. So you have that coming in, and there's that wire. All right. So let's make sure this is off. It's off because we have power now. And so we got everything set up. So we're going to go, what are we going to do here? Well, what we're going to do is we're going to take our float switch. We're going to look at this and go, I got a white wire and I got a black wire. What I'm really going to do is I'm going to do the black wire to the black wire coming in. And this is where it really screws you up if they're using all kinds of different wiring. So to the black wire coming in. Then I'm going to take my pump wire and I'm going to look at that and I'm going to say, well, do I take that and I hook that to my white wire? Negative. You take this wire here, that's the white wire, and you hook it to the black wire on the pump. Well, look at that. Okay, so it is a bridge. This is where people get confused. We get more phone calls on this than probably anything. So you really want to think of, and just because of our standards and codes in the United States and this and that, you're going to have white and black. It's your most common. Okay, you just think of that float switch wire because all they're using is you know, SWJO type wire, so it's all pretty much the same. They use it on all kinds of things. There's some added protections on there, but so it's always going to be white and black. So think of this float switch. Basically, you want to think of it as 2 black wires. That's what you want to do. Now, it's 120 volts. So the way it works, not to confuse anybody, but I mean, you have your, you know, it's like an infinity sign as far as the circuitry is concerned and how the electricity flows. So really, you could hook it white to white or, you know, anything like that. But just to keep it simple, we just say that. So then we have our white wire going to our power white wire directly to the pump, okay? If you hook it up the other way, it won't work, okay? And then you're like, well, why isn't it working? I tried it. It's dead pump. It's not working. It's working. It's just you got it wired wrong. So all of our pumps are tested before they leave the factory. I'm going to tell you that right now. So all of them are wet tested, actually, because if you open the box, sometimes you're like, why is there water in here? Well, that's because they're wet testing everything. And they're making sure that it's working before it goes out the window, out the door. So then you have your junction, okay? Typically what you're gonna do after this little phase, and I'm just going to show you. We're going to take silicone. Now you can buy a silicone wire nut. The thing we don't like is the silicone is typically, it's kind of hard, and the it just doesn't work that well. I'm gonna cut my finger off. Okay, so, and that's the knife I love, but I can't take it to every state because we got weird rules on stuff. Well, it's not any more dangerous than another knife, but okay. So we like to squirt silicone in there liberally, like a lot of it, okay, till it's oozing out. What happens is when it seals, what we've learned and what we see, my dad's been doing this for going on 30 years. When we go out, even if the connections are in the tank, like we had to make a repair, people don't want to pay for new wiring because it's expensive, that's understandable. What the guys are doing is they're taking wire nuts like this, they're squirting silicone up in there, okay, and up in here, and up in here, and a lot of times they'll wrap it with electrical tape. I've been to countless jobs when I was working with them where you take the wire nut off and the connection's beautiful. I mean, the copper's still fresh, it looks good, everything's good. And that's important because if you get a bunch of corrosion on your copper coming from your panel, the issue is you're gonna have to do a new run, and you don't wanna have to do that. The wet silicone, once it cures in there, I've yet to see pulling one of these where, oh, it's bad. I mean, I've seen them submerge, any kind of situation you can think of. So there's your connection, okay? So we have our float switches. We have our wide angle and we have our alarm float, okay? So everything's done. We have our connections in there. They're in the LB. You got this. We got a little pump set up in there. We got this, okay. So before you're gonna cover everything up, obviously, you don't wanna button everything up. You're gonna wanna test everything, okay? So you have your connection going there. You make sure your breaker's off at the house. So then turn your breaker off on at the main breaker box that's feeding this, okay? Then you have this and you turn this on. You can test them one at a time if you want. High water alarm. Oh, it's working. This float is different than this float. This float only has to go to there and it actuates. So it's a narrow angle float. It's only rated for 5 amps. It will not run a pump. It will for a little bit, and then it'll blow up and it'll blow the pump up. So don't use this type of float on a pump switch unless it's rated for the amperage. Make sure you're checking your amperage on your floats. If they don't give you your amperage, it doesn't do you any good. Oh, that float's $10 cheaper. What's the amp rated on it? I don't know. Okay, well, that doesn't help you because you got to know what your pump is pulling in order to pick the correct float switch. So we got that. Now turn the pump on. So this one is a wide angle. And it turns on a little bit wider. There it goes. So, you can see how a pump likes to torque too. If you want a little knowledge on that, when a pump turns on, it torques one way. So generally when it's hooked up in the tank, that's not going to happen. That's why you want a good connection when you're hooking them up. Okay, so that's a little pit basin that we have that we sell. They're pretty popular. Anyways, that's it. So you have your alarm float. You have this float. Okay, and there we go. We're gonna make a mess. So that's the wiring on it. It's pretty simple. We did this pretty quick. Mounted it. Did everything. There are some panels out there. I think for the cost of this panel, some of the panels that are like just alarms are more than this panel. Now, could you use this for just alarm? Sure, if you wanted to. I mean, you're wasting a circuit on there. But because this isn't much more difficult to wire up with 2 breakers than it is with 1 breaker. But for what this is, it's very inexpensive. I think these are $230, $260. Let's find out. We can edit this. So, you ready? Yep. So that's basically it. This panel is pretty economical, $260. So it's a good panel. Like if you're going to have a, this is an excellent panel if you have no aerator or anything like that. Low pressure dosage. That's what LPD stands for. It's what it was originally intended for. You have a little basin like this with a little 1/2 horsepower pump in there. You can put this little basin in there, this panel, and then pump it over to your septic system. There's all kinds of different uses for it. but this panel is great. Okay, some panels are, you know, $230 and they don't have any breakers. You couldn't hook any pumps into them. You couldn't do anything. With this panel, even if you have a sump pump situation where, oh, I'm going to have a sump alarm on there. Okay, well, you could hook the pump into this panel, okay, hardwire it, and you could hook an alarm float on there, okay, and have everything off this, and then when something goes wrong, you have this and that, you got power. The main reason is if we just hardwired this into some box on the side of the house, something goes wrong, okay? Okay, now I got to go all the way around. You call service company out. You do something of that nature. They have to get access to your house. You're not home. What do? Now they can't turn the pump on. This panel is what they do is they allow quick access where people don't have to come into your house. They can be outside. They can turn everything off. They can work on your system, all that. It just gives you a lot more flexibility. It's the proper way to do things. They're not that expensive. As you can see, this was not hard to do. We did this pretty quick. We staged a little bit. I mean, it's not hard to do. It's really not. This is an hour-and-a-half project, save you a lot of money. A professional is going to charge you $900 to $1,200 to do something like this. So this is $260, and you probably have $300-400 into the project. If you got pumps and everything else, it's more, you know. So it is something that you could do yourself. This is for professionals too. A lot of them don't know how to wire a panel like this up, or they're kind of scared. This is a very simple panel. It's a good panel to start on for you guys to know. I mean, because you got your pump circuit, your alarm circuit. Everything's really simple in this panel. So I got everything here. Even got test, silence. So alarm's going off. 12 o'clock at night, you can silence it, and it's still going off. You still have your red light on. But that's it. I hope that was a good educational video for y'all. I hope that gives you confidence to work on something like this, do a project like this. Not hard to do, was pretty straightforward. Remember to like and subscribe. We're going to be doing more panel videos like this. This was the simplest one. So we're going to do a dosing panel. We're going to do an aerobic panel and kind of show you and go through them and show you how to set up. They'll be a little bit longer. But that's it. So remember to like and subscribe. We're here to help you. Give us a call.